So the child in the womb has no value whatsoever?
No, I don't think so at all.
Okay, anytime you start an argument with so, you're doing it wrong. Well, welcome to another Apologist Reacts video. I'm going to do something different than I've ever done this time. I am actually going to react to some real conversations. I've been very inspired by one of my new favorite YouTubers lately, Brad Mondo, reacting to different people, you know, styling their hair or bleaching their hair or whatever. If you haven't watched him before, he's hilarious. And I thought, what if I reacted to some actual real life pro-life people dialoguing with pro-choice people? And I don't want to do it with like organizations. I'm not trying to start a war with some other pro-life group or try to seem like I'm trying to be competitive or anything like that. There are definitely pro-life groups that post videos of them having dialogues on campus that I am very tempted to respond to, but I think ultimately I will get along with those groups and maybe be able to do things with them sometimes better if I don't post reactions to their staff having dialogues. And so I've just found online there are just some people or like organizations that are not pro-life organizations that have posted dialogues or maybe debates between pro-life and pro-choice people. And I just thought it would be interesting to watch them and react. So I haven't seen any of these before. You're getting my live reaction. And I'm hoping not to just be critical. I don't want to just, you know, like, here's things that I would have done differently. I'm really hoping to see some pro-life and pro-choice people having great dialogues, because that's what I want. That is the point of Equal Rights Institute, is we want to help both sides of the abortion debate have better dialogues about an issue that a lot of people are just not having good dialogues about. And so I'm going to be so excited if in some of these videos, one or both people in the dialogue are actually doing things really well, because I would like to celebrate that too. So hopefully this isn't going to be a train wreck. I don't know, but here's the first video I found. It's from a group called Middle Ground. This is clearly produced. Some group who seems to be trying to promote good dialogue has brought people together from different sides of the abortion debate. And so this isn't exactly just like a random pro-life run at college campus, but still might be interesting. Let's take a look.
You can say whatever you want.
Why am I nervous? I don't know why I'm nervous right now. This is like, ooh.
I know what that is like. If you have ever done campus outreach, at least if you're anything like me, it is a nervous thing to do. Like, I think there are probably some people that are so fired up, or maybe in some cases even confrontational, that they are actually like kind of walking onto a campus or somewhere they're going to have dialogues, like just like all fired up and like wanting to get into it with someone. That is not my experience. My experience is of nervousness, of wanting to do well, wanting to love people well, wanting to, you know, be helpful, have the answers, the arguments that will be helpful to people. I definitely identify with what she's feeling.
My name is Patty, and I am pro-life. I had 2 abortions. I know what happens to the emotional and psychological part of women.
My name's John, and I'm pro-choice. 6 years in the Planned Parenthood of Golden Gate.
My name is Marie, and I am pro-life, and I help women reverse their abortion once they've started them, if they would like to do so.
All right.
So one thing just real quick I appreciate about the people who produced this is they didn't do a very easy thing, which is make all the pro-life people men and all the pro-choice people women. I appreciate that. And I like that at least one of the pro-choice people here has worked at Planned Parenthood. So I appreciate that. They also have someone from Abortion Pill Reversal or who is clearly involved with abortion pill reversal. I've got an interview with one of their leaders in our podcast, one of our very, very early podcasts. We might do another thing with them sometimes. It's really interesting. I don't want to get into it right now, but just interesting that they've got this kind of group of people together. So far, I like who they've brought together for this. Let's keep watching.
All of my pro-choice people, please go over there. All of my pro-life people, come to this side. Sometimes I question my beliefs around abortion.
Oh, that's a great question. Just in case you're wondering, my answer is yes. Sometimes I do question my beliefs about abortion. I question my beliefs about just about everything sometimes, especially when confronted with a new and interesting argument or a thought that I haven't thought about. I do that. I hope you do too.
Oh, right. We're supposed to start talking.
Yeah, because you hear the
Sure.
other person's perspective and you're like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think I question mine often, because I could imagine that if I wasn't living my life based on my Christianity, I would want women to have that choice as well.
That's interesting. Okay. I really appreciate where she's coming from, where she's able to put herself in someone else's shoes. So that's really, really good. My hesitation is, it seems like, what she's implying is that her beliefs about abortion, her pro-life beliefs are either based on her religion, or at least she's not confident that she would be pro-life if she were a not Christian. So one, I've got a lot of friends with secular pro-life that I don't think would super appreciate the way that she has framed that. I mean, obviously, this is her experience, clearly being authentic and trying to be honest about her feelings, but you can be pro-life and not a Christian. I just want to make sure everyone understands that. And in fact, and I will link to a podcast below on this, it's really interesting, on a psychology study that came out of Stanford recently. One of the things that I'm taking from that study, my interpretation of the results of that study, is that on average, a secular pro-lifer will actually be more persuasive to a secular pro-choice person just because they have that much common ground about their value system. And so I wouldn't have wanted the first thing for me to say in a situation like this is just like, hey, I'm a Christian and that's why I'm pro-life. Like, that might be a little bit too harsh. I'm not trying to be too harsh, but that's my only hesitation. But I really like, generally speaking, what's going on here. I like her mannerisms. I like that she's talking about the idea of being open-minded, and that she's able to at least say something that like a lot of pro-choice people could agree with. Like the way that she described that right there, a lot of pro-life people can't even do that, of like putting themselves so much in the shoes of a pro-choice person they could like use their language, their phraseology. So that's good. I don't think phraseology is a word, actually. Whatever. Phrasing.
All right, my disagreeers, come on in.
So half and half. Half said open-minded, half didn't. That's interesting.
I used to be a pro-life feminist.
Really?
Yes, until I had an abortion. Actually, I had two. And after I realized what I had done, I knew I had made the biggest mistake in my life. I realized that it wasn't I shouldn't be taking the life of a child. So
I appreciate that she's being open with her story. I think stories are really important for people. I think they can sometimes be maybe too important to people. I think, like, obviously, you should change your mind partially based on good arguments and facts and logic, and not just because you hear a compelling story. But at the same time, I understand the stories are important. What I would have done differently here if I were her is not use the word child there. And pro-life people fight about this a lot. This is easily in the top 5 things when pro-life people send me an email or post a comment disagreeing or maybe come up to me at an event. Then they don't like the word choices that I use. They don't like that I use the word pro-choice instead of pro-abortion or pro-abort or some other label that they would like me to use. And certainly the fact that in my dialogues, I'm not using the word baby or child, at least not in the beginning, not until I've made an argument that it is. Baby and child imply personhood, implies a valuable human being, and not just, I know there are people that will be like, look, you've got zygote, embryo, fetus, baby, and it's a baby because if you look at the definition of the word baby, or, it's just like offspring or whatever. It's like, I know people will try to say, like, technically it is a baby. It's like, yeah, technically, but the way a lot of people use that word, it comes in with emotionality. There's something added in there. And some people try to do those rhetorical tricks in order to sway the conversation to their end. They feel like if they're using the words that kind of tips the scales to their side winning, then they're doing better. And I just disagree. I actually think it makes it harder to persuade the other person because they're a little bit bothered by what you just said. They might not know exactly why, but they're a little bit more on edge. They're more defensive, or they might actually feel like you're trying to manipulate the conversation towards you winning. And that's not what I want to do. So I'm using very neutral terms when I'm talking to pro-choice people. And then if they start using the word baby and I've made an argument that it's a baby and like they seem fine with it, like, fine, I will work with that. So I'll kind of let them lead a little bit when it comes to the terms that we use, because some people just don't mind. Some people don't feel like they're losing any debate points if the word baby is used. And like, fine, then I'm happy to use it. But I don't want them to feel like I'm trying to like trick them into becoming pro-life. I want them to become pro-life because I've got a better argument.
After that, I struggled with it for 35 years with my abortions, and so I have no doubts. I am all the way pro-life.
So the one other thing I would say, again, I really appreciate that she's being so honest with her story. The reason this is not going to be persuasive to a lot of pro-choice people is because they're going to say, yeah, you regretted your abortion, but there are a lot of women that don't regret theirs, at least not right away. They could argue maybe she regretted her abortion because she was in a church that was super judgmental about abortion and like she sort of got brainwashed by her culture into feeling guilt that she shouldn't have felt at all. That is a counter argument that can be made. It's like, well, look, if a society doesn't accept abortion enough, then maybe that's why you regretted it. And certainly there are a lot of people that don't regret theirs. And there are a lot of things that we keep legal in spite of the fact that a lot of people will regret them if they do them, like smoking cigarettes or something like that. Like you might at some point regret smoking cigarettes if you smoke a whole lot of them and you get lung cancer or something like that, but we still keep it legal. And so that is kind of the only other critique that I would make about, especially this is like an opening argument. I think maybe after making an argument about personhood or about how bodily autonomy doesn't trump the right to life of the child, then like adding also, I know that there are a lot of women that regret their abortion deeply after, and at least I think that women should be more informed of that. Like something like that I think would be more persuasive.
But I believe fundamentally that the woman should have that right to make the decision. And I've never been anybody who's pro-abortion. Oftentimes they don't have good choices, and they're picking the lesser of the bad choices.
So I think basically I agree with him a lot of the time. I think there are technically some people who are pro-abortion. I just think that there are not very many of them. And I think most people that we talk about aren't described accurately by the term pro-abortion, because the term pro-abortion doesn't just indicate being pro the choice to have an abortion. It implies something more, something like celebratory of abortion. But to be fair, there are those people that do actually celebrate that abortion's a thing, and more so now than 10 or 15 years ago. Like their whole social media campaigns is based on the idea of like celebrate your abortion. There are some lobbyists, there are some speakers on the other side of the abortion debate that I would say actually accurately fall into the camp of being rightly labeled pro-abortion. But I think he's right. I think this is a thing you'll hear people say a lot, that no one's pro-abortion. I think like most people aren't pro-abortion. I think there are some people who are, but given that they are definitely the minority, it's still best to use the term pro-choice, if nothing else, because I would rather talk to a pro-choice person about the actual important questions here and not just debate what labels we're going to use and then get offended and leave.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm very certain of my views because I want to respect that everyone has that option. And I think that if you take that away, you endanger children more than if you allow them to make that choice for themselves.
So there's a sort of an interesting thing going on here where she's arguably accidentally begging the question. When she says she's worried about endangering children if abortion becomes illegal. Of course, a big question here is the unborn a child? And when I say child, I just mean like a person, and not just a potential person, but an actual person. There's clearly a hidden premise in this argument that the unborn are not children. So therefore, if you make a medical procedure illegal and more dangerous, then it is more dangerous for other actual children. And so just pointing out, just like the post-abortive woman earlier used the word child, and so there's sort of a hidden premise going on for her about the value of the child, this pro-choice woman is doing the opposite thing. I think both are mistakes in the sense of they're both, kind of going into this with that hidden premise that's just not being stated.
But a woman can choose for herself, but she doesn't have the right to choose for someone else. Because if a child is inconvenient as a toddler, are you going to kill that child as a toddler? No.
Okay, so she just trotted out a toddler, which, when done well, I think is perfectly fine. And I'm going to go back in a second because I want to, now that I know she's going to do that, I want to, really pay attention to how she's doing it. But just generally speaking, I think it is okay when the pro-choice person seems to be assuming that the unborn is not a person and just kind of skipping forward past that premise and making an argument, based on, so then therefore abortions would be legal because we don't want to have back alley abortions, or we don't want to have, what about women in these hard circumstances? And it seems like there's this hidden premise to bring out. We do teach people to trot out toddlers. We have kind of our own method. Trotting out toddler is not our idea, but we have our way of doing it. I'll link to an article that we've written where we kind of describe those 4 steps. And certainly you can learn more about it in the Equip for Life course. We have a whole module on trotting out toddlers. So let me go back a little bit. I want to kind of see how she did it. It happened pretty fast. Let's take a look.
She can choose for herself, but she doesn't have the right to choose for someone else. Because if a child is inconvenient as a toddler, are you going to kill that child as a toddler? No.
So I don't like so much the way that what she said before, trotting out the toddler. Like, there are cases when you can choose for other people and things like that. So like, it's just like, it's kind of vague language. Like, it's fine. She's kind of in the right direction. But then the trot out the toddler, I think one of the things that I like about the way that we teach people how to trot out toddlers is we take our time with it. And the second step that we add, so we have this ABCD method. We affirm the concern. There's like a common ground thing that happens here, and embrace them for the weird question. Then create the parallel situation. That's like the thought experiment or the analogy. And then we're going to describe our logic. We're going to take some time and explain what we're seeing, kind of pull the curtain back. And the reason I really wanted us to add this step of brace them for the weird question, and I actually pushed for it to be its own step in the process when we were creating the Equip for Life course, was because this is unusual. It's not what pro-life people usually do. And a lot of times pro-life people, especially if they studied apologetics, go too fast. And I think this was too fast. She instantly was just like, would you kill a toddler if they were inconvenient? And, you know, some people, that's fine. It's fine if you go that fast. But, you know, there's some people where you can kind of have like a rat-a-tat debate real quick and just kind of like people are familiar with the topic and they just kind of go back and forth. But I think it's better if you take your time and you kind of say, I'm going to ask you a weird question. I think this will help you see where I'm coming from. And you can then create this thought experiment and then describe how you see them as being similar in a certain important way. I think it's just going to be more helpful to the other person.
I think we're talking about a completely
But
different thing, though, in that
science.
regard.
We're talking science.
And I'm saying,
Okay, so she responded the way I would expect a lot of people to respond, which is like, why are we talking about toddlers right now? And then the post-abortive woman has jumped to science, presumably because she's about to say that scientifically there's no important difference between the unborn and toddlers. And if she does, then I think she's actually confusing science for philosophy, but let's see.
like a lot of times women have to have abortions because of medical reasons.
That's like
a lot of time.
1%.
Right.
Time? Oh, you got it.
So medical reasons can mean multiple things here. The woman who said it's 0.001%, that's actually just not exactly accurate. It's more than that. But what's tricky here is even some of the studies that like try to figure out why people have abortions, sometimes life of the mother gets included with health of the mother cases. There are women that will have abortions because they've been told this will be better for your health, but it wasn't a life-threatening pregnancy. So I can get confusing. Certainly, it is more often that women have abortions because of a health issue than like a life-threatening pregnancy. But just jumping to 0.0001% feels belittling to those women who are in these tragic situations where, you know, there is a life-threatening situation. It can come across as belittling even to the women who have had medical issues. It's tricky because, to be fair, this is an intense situation because there's cameras. This feels like a debate. They are timed, too. Like, they only have so much time to get stuff in. So this is kind of like more like, you know, when, you know, there'll be like a Fox News roundtable or CNN or whatever, and they'll like throw some people together. And this is going to be a 3-minute segment. And it's all just about how many of your words can you get in for other people's benefit. So this is much more a debate than a dialogue, just I think by the nature of the fact that it's being filmed, it's going to go on YouTube, which is not ideal. At the same time, they're trying to do what they can, I think the producers of this, to make this as much of a dialogue as they can, but that is a tricky aspect of this.
Yes, I know, right in the thick of it.
I like that they're laughing.
Next prompt. I know someone who has had an abortion.
My sister had an abortion.
Almost 2 years ago, I found out I was pregnant and had an abortion forced on me by a man twice my age who made a ton of money, and I felt like I had no other choice. If I wasn't...
I really appreciate that she was willing to share that. That's horrible. If you're watching this, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And coercive abortions are a lot more common than a lot of people think. I'm going to drop some links in the description to talk about that. But that is like an easy area of common ground between pro-life and pro-choice people is obviously we should be able to agree that no woman should be coerced into an abortion. And the word coerced can mean multiple things. There are some women that would say they were coerced into an abortion. They weren't literally dragged by the hair into the clinic. That's not what we're saying, but pressured. They were pressured by the boyfriend, her parents, the boyfriend's parents, sometimes, you know, a leader at her church, something like that. That is really, really not okay.
I wasn't a Christian, and if I didn't believe the things that I believed, I would be pro-choice, like 100%. But at the end of the day, like to my core, I believe that all human life is so sacred, and it's not our choice. It's never been our choice.
I realize
Yeah, so unfortunately, this is where I wish that she had some pro-life apologetics training, because there are reasons to be pro-life that are not religious. Like her even using the words sacred, life is sacred, that's like a religious term. I agree that life is sacred. I am personally a Christian. That's not the main reason or only reason I'm pro-life. There are good philosophical reasons to be pro-life, regardless of what worldview system that you're coming from. I just, filmed, a couple of podcasts with a really fascinating Muslim intellectual talking about why he converted from being pro-choice to pro-life and responding to other Muslim leaders who are pro-choice and why they're maybe not making as good arguments. Like, you can come from a lot of different worldviews and end up on either side of this. There's also Christian pro-choice people. And so the fact that she said here that she would definitely be pro-choice if she wasn't a Christian basically says that she doesn't have any good arguments for being pro-life outside of the Bible. Oh, she needs the Equip for Life course. If you're watching this, I will give you the Equip for Life course. Reach out to me.
that I shouldn't have had that choice because I was choosing life and death over another human being. It's taking a life. But I do definitely understand where you guys came from.
I appreciate this. He ended that with saying, I appreciate where you guys are coming from, or I understand where you're coming from. I think that's really helpful. We've been avoiding the phrase human being at ERI, even though people use it all the time, just because it's not really clear what you mean when you say human being. Do you mean biological member of the human species, Homo sapiens? Is that what you mean? Because sometimes people use human being and that's just what they mean. A lot of times people use the word human being to mean something more than that, something more philosophical, something valuable, something like a person. So we've just been trying to be clear when we use terms. Are we saying human or are we saying person? Even like adding a quick sentence defining what I mean. I might say human, and by that, I just mean member of the human species. Let's see if we can agree on that. I mean something biological and not philosophical, like just trying to clarity is our friend, try to be as clear as you can. So the phrase human being can be unclear, even though I know all kinds of people on both sides of the topic do use it. We're the ones kind of swimming against the stream here. This might seem overly picky to you. There are also probably people who say you should never use the word person just because the word person has been used in history to, dehumanize, take groups of people, of humans, and say they are less valuable. And that is true. But philosophically, it's at least possible for there to be a group of any other group, a subgroup that is different or shouldn't have certain rights based on something. I'm willing to have that discussion. I just don't think that the pro-choice arguments that the unborn are a kind of human that are less valuable, I just don't think that those arguments end up working. But I'm still willing to use the word person and have that conversation that, professional philosophers are having on that level.
The only difference we have is when that fetus becomes a human life. If that's
yeah, so here clearly he means, almost clearly, is most likely what he means is person here when he says human life. And he's right. That is, I don't think it's the only difference. I think they probably also disagree about bodily autonomy, but that is one of the two key, pillar differences between pro-life and pro-choice people. So I think he is doing a great job here. He is adding clarity, which is great. So let me go back. Good job, him.
The only difference we have is when that fetus becomes a human life. If that's a human being, then my tonsils are human beings. I think there are answers.
That's a scary gray area.
That's interesting. Maybe I was wrong. I'm going to go back. Or is he saying just because it's living tissue? What?
If that's a human being, then my tonsils are human beings. I think there are answers.
See, the problem is the pro-lifer interrupted him. I need him to say more for me to even understand what he means by that. Maybe what he means is that his tonsils have living, living tissue, and, that they are living tissue and that the unborn are living tissue, and so that they're the same thing. I can't tell because someone jumped in too quick. So please don't interrupt people when they're making, especially here, he's adding clarity. It's okay. I know it's a debate. So it's like people are just going to want to jump in and cut them off, but I don't even know exactly what he means. So it's kind of hard for me to respond to him.
Very gray area. And in the Bible, you did say, I don't know what part of Christianity, but Jesus says, before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you. Not a sparrow falls from the sky without my knowing.
I feel like I really respect you and your faith. I respect that that's your feeling and that you all feel that way. But I also feel like one can feel that way regardless of the Bible, regardless of Christianity. It's one of those things that happens and has happened actually for decades, for a while. And people make that decision, and it is their decision. They make that decision for whatever reasons, again, you help people who have taken a pill first, then change their mind, and I think that's great. But if you have one and you feel regretful, then deal with it. If you have one you don't really feel regretful, or you feel like it really truly was the best decision for you, then that's what happens. And I just think we all know people like that, or I just don't feel like we have any right to force a particular way, and I think it's great to try to just be open.
Yeah, so a lot of interesting things here. It is very natural for a pro-choice person to move in the direction of, I don't think that people should force their beliefs on others when pro-lifers are making religious arguments. When her argument is basically, Psalm 139 says this, that you were knit in your mother's womb, then of course, the non-Christians are going to say, hey, we're not in a theocracy. We don't make all of our laws based on the Bible or any religious text. And so we're talking about a legal question here, and that's not relevant. It's fine if that's why you're pro-life, but if that's your only reason for being pro-life, you don't get to try to force biblical beliefs in a non-theocracy. And functionally, the woman from abortion pill reversal who's worked with them or whatever has functionally said this is the only reason she's pro-life. See, said if she were not a Christian, she would be pro-choice. So philosophically, apparently pro-choice people have the better argument to her, or she doesn't just know any good pro-life arguments that are not religious. And so naturally, this woman feels this way. And she was very affirming in the way that she said it. She's frustrated. I kind of get that. And she was still really kind of common groundy and respectful in the way that she said it, but she's also saying different people have different experiences, which is true.
Next statement. I sometimes feel judged for my beliefs around abortion.
I'm pretty judged around my beliefs.
That's pretty unanimous.
Hey guys, how you been? It's been a long time.
I think we all feel that way because it's an emotional, a very emotional topic. I've actually been verbally attacked by a lot of the pro-choice people, about what I went through with the regret, the alcoholism, and all of that stuff that tied into the abortion.
For me, it's something that Marie said a little bit a while ago about our Christian faith, and implicit in that is that someone who's pro-choice isn't Christian. I was raised a Roman Catholic. I consider myself a Christian. I don't believe that there's anything in Christianity, as I understand it, that requires me to believe that abortion is murder.
Okay, so one thing, just I was distracted a little bit because I'm a little frustrated with the editing because there's a young woman just to the left of the older post-abortive woman who is not, has she said anything yet? I want to know what she thinks. And I'm is this just an editing thing? Or is this just the way the actual conversation basically went? Because if it did, I would be there wanting to actually give time to her and just be what do you think? You haven't had a chance to speak yet. I don't even want to jump in when right now 5 out of 6 people in the room have said something and she hasn't. Anyway, that's what's going on in my head. The gentleman from Planned Parenthood said that he's Roman Catholic and he doesn't believe that the Bible says that abortion's murder. If I were talking to him, my attempt to change his mind would not be Psalm 139. It would be a syllogism that Scott Klusendorf uses that I think is much more helpful. So premise 1, human beings are made in God's image, are intrinsically valuable because they are made in God's image. That means that you are valuable because of the kind of thing you are, not because of something that you can do functionally. God is the kind of being that can bestow value, and he created these intrinsically valuable beings. So that would be premise 1. Again, I would never use this with a non-Christian, okay? But with someone here that says, I care about the Bible and I don't believe that the Bible's pro-life because the word abortion is not in it, I don't think that's a great argument. So premise 1, human beings are intrinsically valuable because they're made in God's image. Premise 2, the shedding of innocent blood is forbidden. There are multiple verses in the Bible about that. premise 3, this is the one premise that goes outside of the Bible, but just has to add a philosophical premise that the unborn are the same kind of thing as born people, like those human beings, those human entities, that they are both persons. And we can make arguments for that, but that would be one of the premises. Therefore, the shedding of innocent fetal blood is just as wrong as blood, shed of born people. So that would be the direction I would want to go with him. But certainly he is not the only pro-choice Christian, as I said before.
I grew up in a Christian home. My mom's a pastor, but they also respect that. They know that it's my ultimate decision, and they know that what it is that I'm going to do, what I'm going to choose for my life, that they don't have control over, and that I am an adult. Sometimes in the argument between the two sides, there's a lack of respect for the fact that, like, I don't have to agree with you. You live your life the way that you want to, and I'll live it the way I want to, as long as you're not stopping.
Yeah, so here's what I would have wanted to say here if there wasn't like a timer going off. This is because I've heard that argument. It's like, I want to say, you're right. We have a lot of common ground. I am not one of those people that's like, I want everything that is immoral to be against the law. This is where I've got some common ground with my libertarian friends, which is like, I think there's probably actually too many laws. I think Dennis Prager said this really interesting thing a long time ago, where we talked about like, it's not ideal that there are so many laws that people don't even know what all the laws are, and they could actually break a law without even knowing it. Not the obvious, like the ones that everyone knows, but there's so many laws. It's like, yeah, there should probably be fewer laws. I have a lot of common ground with my libertarian friends, my liberal friends about certain laws that arguably ought to be changed. Okay, so I can find common ground there to say, look, I'm with you on a lot of that, but can't we at least agree that there should be some laws, and maybe at least the ones that are trying to protect vulnerable people from being like majorly harmed or killed by bad actors, by people who would do them harm for some reason. Like, shouldn't we at least have that? And I can usually find a lot of common ground that direction. So it's like, it's not like she's just like the young woman's wrong, that everything she's saying is not true. Of course, in a lot of ways, yeah, you've got the right to do a lot of different choices in life. There's an open question here of if abortion is actually killing a valuable person, and if bodily autonomy arguments ultimately fail in what they're trying to do, which is to say that abortion should be legal, even if the unborn is a person, because of bodily autonomy. And I'll link in the description to a bunch of, a landing page which has a bunch of articles and videos and things about that very important part of the debate. I'm not getting into that because it would take too long. But if those things are true, then abortion arguably ought to be illegal, even though a lot of other things ought to be illegal.
Sorry, you guys.
Next prompt. I have children.
I have 2 kids, a son who's 30, and then a daughter who's 28.
I have one son who is 36. He's adopted. I couldn't have children biologically. I convinced a doctor to give me a tubal ligation because I punished myself for having the abortions.
I have a daughter. She's a year old and she's in heaven.
How do you feel having children informs your views about abortion?
To me, in my experience in Planned Parenthood, almost everybody had kids. And the slogan, if you will, of Planned Parenthood was no child an unwanted child. And we wanted our children, and that's why we chose to have them.
What about all the people that would gladly take care of that child that cannot have a pregnancy to save their life?
Well, because the woman has to go through
9 months for a whole life that a child could have?
Okay, so I'm okay with the question that she asked. It could have been asked better, but I'm okay with asking that question about the phrase every child a wanted child, which I don't think is the best pro-choice argument. But he went to respond and she cut him off. Again, so far of all the people in the room, she is the one, really it's both of them on the right that have done the most interrupting. I don't think there's been one time where a pro-choice person has interrupted a pro-life person. And that's not ideal. Ask a question, a hard question, a complicated question of someone, and let them take the time and respond to it. And they might have to think about it. You might even have to let them pause. We call it thinking pauses. I'll link to an article about that in the description, but sometimes you have to let people process a tough question so they can then respond to it.
Disagrees, come on in.
Wait, that's not fair. I'm frustrated. I'm for this poor guy is trying to answer a question and the timer goes off. Ah.
I think one of the things that I immediately reacted to is that, okay, 9 months, whatever, but there are so many children, not just in America, but the world over, that don't have loving parents, that are not in a loving situation, that are not cared for, fed, clothed, loved. And I think that is the most important thing, to care about our children because they are our future.
So the child in the womb has no value whatsoever?
No, I don't think so at all.
Okay, anytime you start an argument with so, you're doing it wrong. Don't do that. That's that thing. What was that Jordan Peterson, Channel 4? I forget the woman's name who interviewed him, but it's hilarious. And if you haven't watched it, it's 30 minutes well worth your time. Whether or not you even like Jordan Peterson, this is like the best example I've ever seen of the problem with trying to ask a bunch of leading obnoxious questions that start with so. So what you're saying is, it's just like trying to put them in a box. That it just instantly is going to make the other person defensive. Now, I did it with Jordan Peterson because he's really quick on his feet and really relaxed and has like had all this time to like kind of build that up. Like I would have been even more defensive probably in that situation. And I don't agree with everything Jordan Peterson says, whatever. Like I'm just saying, like that's a classic example of don't do that. Don't ask questions that are just so pointed and leading. It makes people defensive. I'm going to drop a link in the description to a video on why you should avoid making any arguments that end with question marks because it instantly makes them defensive. There is a better way. Let me back up a little bit.
And I think that is the most important thing, to care about our children because they are our future.
So the child in the womb has no value whatsoever?
No, I don't think so at all. I'm not saying that. I never said that.
Okay, I'm just asking.
I'm just saying that.
Good for her for clarifying. That is not what she said. That was not a fair rephrasing of her view. There were a lot of assumptions that were baked into that question. She's right to just say, no, that's not it.
To me, that's unclear, whether it's, this or that or this or that. And despite the fact that you say there are people out there that want to adopt this child or want to take care of this child, there are still so many that are not. And that's
I don't think
horrible
that
to-
wrong makes this right, though.
No,
I understand that. I'm not saying that. I'm only responding to your comment about.
Like my view is I don't personally.
That other girl still hasn't said a thing. I want to know what she thinks.
I don't personally want to have kids. I want to adopt all my children because of that reason. And because I lived with a family that took me in when my family didn't want me.
That's really cool.
And so I understand
Love all that.
that one, the foster system and adoption is not that easy. And if we're making it about taking care of the child, yeah, let's do that. Let's take care of the children. But we need to make sure that there are opportunities in place for all the children to be successful so that that child has a world to come into that's actually going to be good to it.
Okay, so fine. Like I'd be happy to respond to that and demonstrate again. She's assuming that the unborn are not persons. This argument would not work for killing some toddlers in order to make it so that everyone else is going to be more successful unless he's a straight up utilitarian, which maybe she is. Again, I don't know. I haven't heard enough from what she says, but I'm happy to have that conversation. But I'm kind of afraid at this point of what the pro-life people are going to say in response to it.
Because we don't live in that world right now. We don't offer those things to our children.
You should talk a lot of the people that came from a ton of adversity who've now made it in this world, who
We're not
literally
talking
came from
about
the
that.
slums.
We're not talking about the success
Yeah,
that
but you
happens. We're
can't
talking about people that are. We're talking about kids.
Yeah, so this is what happens. This is what happens when people are just debating anecdotes. There are some people who've done really well. Well, there are also a lot of people who've done really crappy. Like, those both exist. And so, do you see how this is devolving now? Let me go back a little bit.
Of adversity who've now made it in this world, who
We're not
literally
talking
came from
about
the
that.
slums.
We're not talking about the success
Yeah,
that
but you
happens. We're
can't
talking about people that are. We're
life-
talking about kids today that do not have
and their
a home.
worth, in my opinion, is exactly equal to a 20-week baby in a
Totally
womb.
understand, and I respect that. I'm only saying my only comment.
Just to make sure you understand, that's not an argument. That's just an assertion. It's an assertion that they're both equal. I agree with her conclusion, but she has not made an argument for that outside of Psalm 139.
I'm only saying my only comment was, I feel like it's unfair to be like, well, blah, 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 9 months. Why can't you just have a kid for 9 months and then give it up? Oh, cool.
I really like the way that she reacted to the timer of this. Like, she's so fun. She's bringing lightness to it in spite of the fact that she's frustrated. She handled that so well. She made everyone laugh. Yeah, she didn't get enough time to really complete her thought, but she had kind of said it before. It's like, it's just not sufficient to just say, well, there are people out there that want to adopt. That does not solve the abortion problem. I'm sorry. A lot of pro-life people want to say adoption is just this easy solution. It's not. It doesn't solve all the issues that pro-choice people have.
All right, last question of the day. I was surprised by someone's response today.
So presumably the woman who's not said a thing yet is also on the pro-life side. I have to wonder, would she defend the pro-life position better than the other two are? Again, there are things that the other two are doing that are fine. I don't want to be like overly harsh or something like that. There are just a lot of things I would do differently. Ooh. Good.
I wasn't expecting to hear some of the stories about people's lives and their experiences who've had abortions, and like I can only imagine the pain that is associated to making that decision, and I have a lot of compassion and sympathy for people who go through that.
That is just a really sympathetic thing to say. Good on her. She is doing so great in this dialogue in a lot of ways. I think some of her arguments, there's some question-making stuff going on, which happens a lot, but that was just a really kind thing to say. I'm just good on her.
I wasn't expecting it to be as calm as it was. I think that there were moments, but I think for the most part we were respectful of each other, and I still think that you guys are awesome people.
Oh, I love this woman. She's awesome. Oh, good for her. That's so respectful. I really hope someone on the pro-life side returns that sentiment.
Side of this situation.
What? How is the timer going off now? The pro-life girl in the plaid is still not said anything. Come on. She was one of the only people who came to the circle. Okay, maybe I should have walked in. This has to be edited down, right? They had to. Is there some full long version somewhere that's not 13 minutes? I want to see that.
I wasn't surprised at how this has gone, because when we were all talking outside, it didn't make any difference whose side was on whose side, and we all bonded right away.
That's great. Good for her.
Sometimes our levels got a little bit raised, but you know what? We all respect each other.
No matter what you do, you've heard all the arguments. There's not going to be one argument where...
Oh, you've not heard all the arguments yet. I'm sorry. For pro-choice, you've not heard all the arguments on the pro-life side. Not from this, at least.
You're like, oh my gosh, I just changed my mind. No, it's never gonna, people are who they are, and it usually takes a certain situation happening. But I
strongly disagree with that. Common ground. Of course, there are people who change their mind because of a big situation happening. That can go either direction, by the way. There are pro-life people who become pro-choice because suddenly they had a crisis pregnancy and they realized, oh wow, how much of a crisis this can feel like. Maybe abortion ought to be available to some people. So that can go either direction. But there are people, I have seen them. I have witnessed all kinds of people become pro-life just because I made a better argument than they had. And I did such a good job of finding common ground, of even making better pro-choice arguments than they were able to, and then responding to them, that they were like, I guess in the end, pro-life is the one that makes the most sense. And they were open-minded enough to get there in one day. Good for them. So I don't think that you're only going to change your mind if you have some major situation happen to you. No, that's not true. And if so, why are you even talking to pro-choice people? Why would you even make a pro-life argument to them if you think that the only thing that can change their mind is them having some huge, situation, like maybe having a baby, like maybe then they see the light and they become pro-life or something like that. And maybe that's why she doesn't care to learn pro-life arguments outside of what the Bible says. What he already just kind of knows from church or whatever, because he doesn't think those arguments make a difference. They do. I see it every single campus outreach I've ever been on.
I think it's healthy to have the dialogue. I think it doesn't happen enough. It happens too much behind our computers. And
I agree with that.
Oh, okay.
that's cool. Sorry, dog. Okay.
Oh, I guess we're hugging.
I like that they're all hugging at the end. They were really good natured. That was interesting. There's a lot I appreciate about what this channel is clearly trying to do. I'm interested in seeing if they have other videos on this topic. I might watch some of the other ones that they do. I mean, a lot's going to come down to who they pick to have those dialogues. The timer thing is really frustrating. And the fact that not everyone got a chance to talk. I have no idea what's going on in the mind of the presumably pro-life woman in the plaid, but I sure would have liked to have heard from her. There you go. I hope this was helpful to you. Let me know in the comments if you have a link to a video that someone has posted of them having a conversation about abortion that you'd like me to respond to that is not from like a big pro-life organization. Post them in the comments and I'd be open to doing that. If you like this kind of thing and this is helpful for you, this is what we do here. We try to help pro-life and pro-choice people to have better dialogue. So like, subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Now go have an important conversation.